It's still morning. Yeah, I was like, it's almost lunchtime, so almost good afternoon. Or if you're on the East Coast, good afternoon. How's everyone doing on this Friday? Why are we worried? Why do we care? That is the big question at hand, right? I'm going to give it like another minute here to let some more people jump on. Yay, Meet the Shermans is on. I don't think we got a picture together yesterday. I was bummed because I saw a lot of you and then I was like, this was it was really nice to see you guys. I wish it could have been under better, if you saw me before the hearing ended. Hey, Kate, how's it going? If you saw me before the hearing, I was obviously in better spirits, but afterwards it was really hard because we were all just very, very sad. And when I say I got that same pit in my stomach, it just feels like 2015 all over again. It just brings me back to years ago when they passed SB 277, and I felt like I was in the darkest place and I felt so alone. And my husband and I were looking around at many of our friends who really they hadn't had their kids yet, or maybe they had just had their babies. So for them, the school thing was not really a problem because you're not worried about school when your baby is just a baby and you still have 5 years. You think, I really have all this time. And I guess Jeff and I just took a whole summer. It was really devastating. And that was actually one of the summers that we did so much with our wedding photography. So that was even harder because I said, well, let's see if something else comes along in terms of work, and then maybe we can, that'll be a sign. And there was no sign in that. It showed us that, no, your money is in California. Like your family's, in terms of financial, it's here. And I just felt so mad. I was mad at literally everybody. I think back to the person that I was several years ago, and just how angry it made me, and obviously angry at the wrong people. I was angry at God. Why would you finally, like, years and years of doing this, and I get to a place in my business where I'm so successful, and now it's like this calling in me that I have to leave. And I guess at that point, it just didn't dawn on me that there'd have to be that choice. If it was my kids' health versus, my work, it was always going to be my kids' health first. And, oh, hi, Lyra. She's on. Are you back yet? Are you already back home? I know you left today, right? I'm just not sure if you're still in Sacramento or not. And actually, I gotta have Lyra on soon on a live because I wanted to kind of go over that AB 262 with you. But because, yeah, with that one, it's like we have bigger problems, and I just lost my train of thought because of that one, right? That's scary. Why does what's happening in California matter? Why does what's happening in New York matter? Because everything that happens in these test ground states trickles in to the rest of the country. It really does. And I hate when people say that politics don't matter, because as we saw yesterday, it matters. It kind of matters in like the scheme of it all. As much as you don't want politics to have any say, and you just, look, we can agree to disagree, and your elected officials, these people that are your public servants that you have entrusted to put your needs first and your children first, ultimately told you yesterday, California, that the state knows what's best. And when you've given the state that much power, that's what happens. And so when people say it's not a Republican issue, it's not a Democratic issue, it kind of is a big government, and how much of a babysitter do you need? We have a country filled with children who never grew up. Meaning to say, a lot of adults that still need to be coddled by the state. And it's really a shocking thing to see in person, that you're sitting there. We already understand what these indoctrination centers are doing. We understand what kind of people they breed up. Yet we have been so indoctrinated ourselves to, number one, think that we need all of that. We need them. And it's literally like you're in this room filled with people begging to not be poisoned, but to still allow the same state that wants to do this to your kids to educate your kids. So there's a lot of, I got so many thoughts on this one, because it's a thing to see. And you're going, wait a minute. The best that can happen here, you're begging for your kids to continue to be educated by the enemy. And the best that can happen is they're going to be done with their education, okay, in the same shoes you're in, not knowing what to do without their help. So we have just generations worth of people who have willingly given up responsibilities that many of them don't realize they've always had that power in them to not only teach their own children. But why I'm going to break down a little bit of this bill and just the dangers of what we have done as a society in a whole. So psychopaths are running the show. We get this, yesterday, the only thing pleasant about yesterday was that, at least from what I could see, we weren't being sprayed. Probably because there were going to be powerful people in this area, right? So for starters, you're going into this building where the people, the main guys in California, and they call all the shots here in this building. You're walking into this building, and on the way into, first of all, it's government run, right? That's So how many who were there got lost because their actual, where you should go, how they direct you, the signs up don't make sense? So how many of us were like, where do we, okay, I can go into for hours on anything that the government touches and handles and runs, literally turns to crap. They are so inefficient. Okay, but I won't go down that path right now. I was just like, oh my gosh, I just got told by two people who work here the wrong directions on how to get to the room that I have to get to. And as I'm walking, there's two other people there. I'm not so sure if they were assemblymen either. Probably not. They just worked in the building. And one guy, of course, as walking, has the nerve, because he's seeing some of these signs as we're walking in towards the elevator, to just say aloud, right? Or kind of like this, oh man, is this just a bunch of unvaccinated? Yeah, we better bring out the Lysol. They're just going to be spreading the measles. And as we're walking, the mom in front of me stopped and was like, can you not, maybe, can you just not say things like that? You're being really insensitive. And that, of course, sprung up, this fire in a lot of the other parents who were kind of around to be like, I'm like, hey, how weak are you that you're afraid of the measles? And these guys had the nerve now to, I wasn't even saying anything about that. I wasn't even talking about that. They don't want to engage. They want to say things like this because they are so not informed. And so you have a bunch of these unvaccinated, not up-to-date people in the same building together. Go figure, if they're that afraid of the measles and it's apparently the unvaccinated that are spreading diseases. Well, good for you. You've just allowed 90 people in the same room as you, assemblymen. So I mean, are you scared? Like, are you shaking in your seats right now? No, of course you're not. You're like on your iPads. These people couldn't even lift up their faces to make eye contact for long enough. It lasted it was only when they'd hear a parent every now and then say, "Thank you for listening," then they'd listen. But they don't care. You literally have psychopaths running the show. If you want to know who was there at the roll call, just go to legiscan.com. These are the people that pretty much had say. All right, these are all the assemblymen. There were the 2 nays, some who just abstained from a vote. And I love that because this is a government site. I love that on here you can very, very easily just follow their money because it all has to be made public. So for instance, you'll click on one of them and it'll show you all the contributions that they receive. Okay. And I want you to, when you have the time, to just look up from in anybody in health, what they receive from here, who in government agencies and education also donated to them and their campaigns. This is the site you'd go to, okay? This one is followthemoney.org, but this one here is legiscan.com/California roll call so that you could look up what actually happens. So I guess thank you to Autumn Burke and Marie Waldron for I guess being the only ones to have a little bit of common sense and maybe a little bit of decency in all of this, even though they mentioned that there were it was parts of the bill that they didn't like. It wasn't this whole over, it wasn't the entire issue of that your rights are being infringed on, but let's kind of break it down a little bit on how it played out. So each side obviously got 10 minutes to make their, I guess, to be convincing of whether they support or oppose the bill. In between, they had these 2 moms that they called tweeners because they were in-betweeners. You would think maybe a better name. But they were called tweeners, stating that they were still undecided on the bill. There were things about the bill that they just weren't a fan of. What is very interesting in the testimonies of these mothers from many of you who watched, okay, the first mom that goes up, and they're pro-vaccine moms, so that this is how it started. They're pro-vax moms. The first one goes up, and literally her first sentence is, my baby was born healthy and perfect, because most babies are, right? By around the time of 6 weeks, I'm willing to bet her healthy born perfect baby got at least vitamin K, Hep B. Around the 6-week mark, there were all of these autoimmune problems all of a sudden. So her entire testimony is that she counts on herd immunity, but she's iffy about the bill because due to her own kid having this autoimmune, all you guys have pretty much know the bill. If you don't, please go back and read it. But now she's going to have to continuously prove that her kid needs these exempts. And as we have seen, there is an entire lie in the immune compromised that they can't be vaccinated, so they're counting on everyone else to be vaccinated. Because why do we have stories of children awaiting heart transplants that you saw at the Boston hospital? The child is awaiting a heart transplant. They need to get up to date on their vaccines before the surgery, before any of this. So what they're lying to you about is that the immune compromised still have to be vaccinated anyways. They still have to get the vaccine. These children, how many stories do you continuously see of parents who their kids went through the entire chemotherapy? They did the leukemia, chemo, whole procedure in the hospital. And then when they're done and their kids now are cancer-free, the parents are acting grateful that they can now finally vaccinate their kids again. How many stories? So you're going, I don't get it. If your kid's really immune compromised, they shouldn't receive any vaccine, right? But they're willfully looking forward to this, to getting back on the schedule, just because they're so blindsided, and they'll never blame that that's what could have caused it in the first place. So you're here listening to these two moms sitting in this room. The second mom was talking about how she herself was vaccine injured, okay? Even after she describes all of the symptoms that she had, all of the, like how obvious it was that it was a vaccine injury, she mentions that 2 times the doctors told her when it came to her that it was just a virus. So she still had no idea for a little bit longer because she thought it was just a virus. But when the same thing happened to her child, and she mentions it wasn't the first round of the vaccine, it was the second round. And the second round is what gets you. That second and third round is what, if the kid is going to die from SIDS, it's going to likely be the 4-month or the 6-month well check. You realize that, right? I have a highlight called Allergies and Vax that kind of explains that second dose and why that second dose is the killer dose. Because after the first one, if you've survived, your body has now attempted, right? Because that's what it's the vaccine is supposed to do, to create this antibody to ward off whatever that was, okay? And literally, it's supposed to be a 1 in a million chance. If you're out in the wilderness and you get stung by a mosquito, the chances of that same mosquito stinging you in the exact same spot area is very, very slim. It's super slim, to where, like, you know, kind of like an injection. Anyway, I won't get into that because that's all in that highlight, so I don't want to waste time on here. But for them to continue with these stories, that this one mother who, after already admitting that she was injured by the vaccine because of the condition that it left her in, she still went back and got another vaccine for herself. So that tells you, I mean, I don't mean to be offensive here, but if you're a sane person sitting in this room listening to this, to not want to reach out and just, because if you want to continue to do this to yourself, knowing that the previous ones messed you up, then you're going to end this story with saying that you are still for herd immunity, and you have the balls to be in the same building with hundreds of parents after sharing a testimony like that, demanding that these other parents put their children through the same garbage that you just did? Are you out of your mind, lady? Have you I quit. I would. It was hard to breathe in that room. It was really hard to breathe. Really hard to breathe. Wow. You two bitches. We're heartbroken for what happened to your children. We're really heartbroken for what happened to your children because they had you dunce caps as parents. But don't expect us to make our children go through the same thing. Because after listening to your story, after the first time a doctor had to lie to you, you entrusted them now with your babies. That is your fault entirely. That is nobody else's fault. Flash forward a little bit after hearing this and seeing some of these assemblymen like nodding and agreeing on the herd immunity thing. I just was like, this circus, this is going downhill. This is going downhill in a fury. Because then comes in about 50 or something. It was like a lot of this yesterday, right? So then comes in the people who support the bill, and you're allowed to go up and say your name and if you oppose or support it. And so initially you're like crushed because we're only in a room the room is 90 people for us, and it felt small, it felt tight. And to see the sides kind of lined with people who were in support of this was really, really, it was kind of a crushing moment, I think, for all of us. But as many of you saw, the opposition lasted 10 times longer, 20 times longer. So, they had some people come in. You had Dorito, who was there, who her family owns stock in pharmaceuticals. And there's, of course, no conflict of interest. She gets to go up and state what she has to say. But to sit back and witness hundreds of parents, hundreds. I got to go on a long bathroom break because I had to go downstairs and go through, elevator down the stairs, had to get checked out. Literally by the time I was still coming back with my group, there were lines still and swarms of parents that were ready to still say that they opposed. And it was a beautiful thing to see. Did these assemblymen bother looking up from their iPads or whatever was going on in front of them? Hardly half the time. Their faces were literally just down. These are parents, let me tell you, not everybody that was there lived in Sacramento. I believe there were at least 4 buses all over, mostly from Southern California. People had been bussed in from San Juan Capistrano. That's down towards San Diego. Literally sat on a bus for 8 hours to come here to have 2 seconds to tell you that they oppose this bill. And you have not even the decency to look up as they are talking to you. It was so disgusting, so disrespectful. And these, at least, people will always try to squeeze something in at the very end, right? There were at least 100-something parents that squeezed in at the very end or between that they are vaccine injured or that their children are vaccine injured, or a couple of them mentioned that there were deaths. There was a mom who was like, my child died after the DTP. And the absolute audacity of out of maybe the 700 something that opposed this bill and had something to say, maybe there were 2 people that lashed out at Pan because, you have to, your heart breaks for them. You've literally lost everything. And this is a man that is continuing to take more. You've already lost everything. So you almost couldn't fault these people for just calling him out, and many of them said, I'm praying for you, or, to that extent. After all is said and done, when each assembly person had to go and speak before they either said yay or nay or had a few questions, they took time to apologize to Senator Pan. They had to take the time to tell him that they understand that his crusade and that he really cares about what he does and he cares about these, he cares about children. And they literally dismissed the 100+ stories on actual vaccine injury from the people in their community and their state that they have promised to serve and to protect. These are our public servants apologizing to the very person that is putting you in this. You know what? If you were still undecided, that tells you a lot, doesn't it? That kind of tells you everything you needed to know about who you've allowed to make these decisions for your kids. Stating that the parents are driving out of their way to go to doctors in other regions and other counties to get these medical exempts, and faulting the doctors and faulting the parents for having to do this. And you can't even look these people in the face after they've made an 8-hour trek to see you for 2 seconds. You guys, at the very end of this, these same people, they didn't even have the decency to leave the room before laughing and chatting with one another after this hearing was over, knowing that there were dozens of parents sitting just not even 30 feet in front of them bawling their eyes out. Bawling their eyes out because now their children will not qualify. Their already immune deficient, immunocompromised children will not qualify. And they were in tears, and these people, some of them were able to leave and have that decency, but there were several that stayed back and were just chatting with each other like it was just another freaking Thursday. That was heartbreaking. So yeah. Lee Dendis, I loved when she came up and spoke. I think she only had a couple minutes, but she was her testimony was really powerful. She's on our side here, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit of what she said, but she was saying that this was obviously a very unprecedented bill. It puts the state between the doctor and the patient, and it gives a state actor, because that's ultimately what that person is. They have no medical schooling. It's literally a paid public servant, a public official that works for the state, that has now the right to block and revoke these decisions that have been made between the doctor and the patient. And if not, the state gets it. She mentions it's not if the state gets it wrong, it's when the state gets it wrong, because these public officers will never have even met these children. It's going to be paperwork that's going to get to their desks, and they're going to sit there and take however long they need to take to thumb through this shit. And you had the people there with the statistics saying that this kind of stuff can take months. And as you're in waiting, as you're in limbo, your child needs to be continuously on that CDC schedule in order to remain in school. So if your kid gets a terrible reaction from vaccines and they're due again, in a few months, or you're waiting it out before the next round, while you're in limbo and while you're in waiting, how long are you going to be waiting for? Like a year at least? There are some cases where it can take up to 15 months. It didn't work in West Virginia. You need to look at what's happening over there because they tried to implement this same thing. So under 276, no one is going to be held accountable. Do you understand this? No one is held accountable. That health official has zero liability. There's just no checks and balances. And not only that, the state cannot practice medicine. It can't practice medicine. And then where does it end? Now that we've allowed this type of government involvement in our lives, she mentioned a very slippery slope, and she used an example of what if you go in and you've got diabetes and your doctor now prescribes you on a certain type of insulin for X amount of time, and there's an issue with the insurance because, insurance, when they get involved, things get messy too, obviously. Can the government now, can that public health official now cancel out your insulin treatments because they don't agree with this diagnosis? That's ultimately what it's getting to. Because if your kid has already experienced a seizure because you put them through the fire for the freaking sake of herd immunity, the same herd that's going to turn their back on you, if you've already done it and your kid has experienced seizures, it's up to you to continuously prove that your kid shouldn't have this stuff, and that's yearly? Is that really what they're saying? Is that really what they said yesterday? That they have just, besides the fact that they have zero accountability and liability on this, and then they're going to track, like they're tracking parents because you have to continuously file this. Like now you're going to be in a system, in a database. All medical exemptions submitted to the registry with no option to opt out. All medical exemptions, California, need to be submitted before January 2021. You have a year and a half that you got to still submit those in, and they're up for review. They're up for review, even if there was a death. Do you understand this? An injury or a death. After everything yesterday, when the hallways were chanting out, "We do not comply," you heard children in the back yelling this out too. And I'm not sure whether they were yelling out, "We do not comply," or "We do not qualify." And to sit there and witness it, we've failed these babies. We have failed these children that now will not qualify and have to go through this again, or their siblings have to go through this. Really painful to see. It is a huge privacy violation. I mean, it violates all of HIPAA, right? It violates due process. It goes against the Hippocratic oath that they take, which is to first do no harm. Because if the doctor determined that the vaccination may result in injury or death, you're telling me now that this doctor is going to have limits yearly? Limits. And they made a good point that some doctors have 100 patients, some have 1,000 patients. By the time 5 medical exempts are given out for the year, that's a bit of a red flag that now the state is going to get to come in and investigate a little bit and question the doctor. So if they have limits, and then the children even they have to continue to be vaccinated while in review, because the Health and Human Services Secretary gets that final say. And children also have no ability to go to court to review in detail why they were denied and fight this. And shouldn't it even at least be that before you stamp off that it was denied, that there was some kind of meeting with the parent and the children? Like, how could that not have been put in there? Just that's it. That is it. So which is it? Which is it, pro-vaxxers that love to scream out, "Doctor knows best"? Because California just told you the doctor doesn't know best. California just told you that the doctor doesn't know best. So if the patient doesn't know best, and the parent doesn't, and the doctor doesn't know best, who knows? The state. These lunatics that do not care about public health. They do not about public health. You're talking about a less than 1% aid that need medical exemptions. It's what about investigating the doctors then? I love that some people brought that up. Like, well, if we're having an issue, never been a case where we've actually caught a doctor, who was fraudulent all of these medical exempts. Why don't we go after that? Why are we going to their process to just when the rest of the state, 99 point whatever percent of the state, client with our bullshit? These are just baseless assumptions that these doctors are. How about if you stopped poisoning children with triple the amount of poison these? Then wondering why there are triple the exempts that have to be given out in absolute. Because this is why we're seeing an increase directly after multiple shots to begin with. How dare these people? How dare they? Now doctors against each other and weigh out who's need for these exempts. So tell me now how you can continue who you're supposed to trust, that's supposed to put your babies first. You have limits, but they gotta now pick and be really, really selective. What's it gonna take? What is it? Is it be that your child had a meth experience in order for them to give you that exemption? Take? They have just done a huge to these professionals, and they should be prayers, not this. You know, because how do you feel now that your doctor's cut off at the knees? This is not just about kids. You guys realize this. This is for, how do you feel as a patient now? In for your checkup, realizing that your doctor answers to this, not to you. How does that make you feel? Not to mention how slanderous here is. And I love, because I'm coming into what was saying too. Once again, paraphrasing from my notes here, but he was, first Sears thing, you're going to read a lot of fraudulent claims, a lot, okay? He wasn't even anti-vax. He was for a delayed type schedule to try to, like, not as terrifying in terms of side effects. He wasn't even about, why is he treating so many anti-vax? Hello? Parents are running him because they've realized that there's few vendors that actually give a shit about their patient. That's why. They want to attack this man and say that he's just trying to profit off of people. He is busy all of this nonsense. And there was an issue with, only issue with this man and why he, and to begin with, was due to a, well, he had mentioned it was a custody dispute. So it was and there was obviously a dispute between the mother and the father, but in court he was able to prove, agreed with Dr. Sears that the child was vaccine injured, which is why the child, the father who wanted to continue to vaccinate the kid for whatever reason, filed a complaint board, which put him now in probation, and that this kind of thing happens to, they have to pay, like he said, $20,000 a year in probation fees. His insurance for him doubles, which is why many doctors now should have always done this, but now you're fat chance finding a doctor, allow any kind of religious or medical without both parents' signatures on that paper. Meaning to say, once again, the importance of with your spouse. Really. Because, hold on, Kimmy says, I have a small home, I can help. Oh, we're talking about medical refugees here? Yeah, for sure. We've done it. We've done it for a few families. That's kind of where it's going to be getting to next. But he was saying that there will be no one left. This is Dr. Sears was stating that there's not going to be anybody left to serve this minority of children who are indeed immunocompromised. And it's going to pressure doctors to be giving out more vaccines to children who they know shouldn't be receiving them in order to keep them on this schedule. And they're facing their livelihoods. That's their career. So how can you, as a parent now in California, knowing this, how can you still bring your children? The wolf is in the hen house, folks. You're bringing your kids to these places. You're trusting these people. It is such a slippery slope what's happening right now in California. Here's a big bottom line in this, okay? We can all agree right now too that because there was discrimination yesterday, there were talks before coming in, and you heard that there was issues like assemblymen, some people that were up there that were not comfortable with a bunch of anti-vaxxers being in the building because they were afraid. So number one, you got really weak ass We have senators who look at everything else that's going on in this country in terms of health, and they're afraid of a rash. You've elected in people that are really afraid of a rash and a vitamin A deficiency. It's segregation. It's segregation. It's been wrong in all fronts of history, right? So we can all agree that something like slavery was pretty bad, right? I want to say that we can do that together. And it would be unthinkable today to even consider negative, to consider the negative after effects of getting rid of slavery. Like, if you're sitting back today going, yeah, slavery was bad, but, oh my gosh, you will be literally, people will cut you off. They will cut you off. So you can't even today state a maybe good thing that came from slavery. You just can't do it. Don't do it. I'm warning you not to do it. Okay? Especially in the state of California. Nobody is sitting on their porch right now, even in middle America, drinking their mint juleps, right? Like pondering not only its return, the return of slavery, but saying things like, wow, the cotton industry really suffered because we took away slavery. It was never a good thing, okay? It was never a good thing, ever. This statement is not comparing pro-vaccine to being pro-slavery, but it's making an example of a time in our country when the right to choose, okay, was given to some and taken from others. That's the comparison here, because if we cannot agree right now on anything, because both sides are concerned about the safety of their children. That's where we agree. But if you're worried that your vaccinated child is going to catch a disease that they were vaccinated against from an unvaccinated child who does not currently have this said disease, then shouldn't your anger be towards the manufacturer, since they were the ones who failed you in the first place, right? Because you were injecting your child with something that was not effective, apparently. And if this were to happen and you could prove it and then prove that you yourself are all up to date on all of your shots and boosters, then I can understand the anger there. But now, please try to understand, at best, if you're able to, why millions of parents are in an uproar since these mandated vaccines are not doing their job, and our children need to now suffer potential risks to appease your anger. It is your job as a parent. Newsflash. It is your job as a parent. It is not the government's to do the research, weigh in on the risks, the real risks of whether you should or shouldn't vaccinate your child, because you had, for the longest time, these rights to make these decisions for your children. It's getting limited. You have the right to make the decisions to protect your child. You do not have the right to make these decisions to protect my child. That has always been mine. Mine, not yours. I'm speaking to every single parent that believes the lie that is herd immunity. It's never been your call. You get to choose how you're going to protect your kid when that fire is coming down the pipe. And your option is never going to be to throw my kids in front of yours. Never. And I don't think people are understanding that, because they are weighing in on your sympathy, people. Do you realize this? This is why we're in this mess to begin.